If you're not using deserts in your Dungeons & Dragons campaign, you're doing yourself a disservice. Deserts can be one of the coolest things you can have in Dungeons & Dragons when you use them right. Deserts in D&D, you have to think of as the extremes if you want them as a setting, as a backdrop, because deserts just aren't simply an arid terrain. Think about the types of deserts we have actually just here in the world. Giant sand dunes that span massive spaces, or sand dunes that are miles and miles wide but surrounded by mountains and forest on either sides. You've got deserts that are flat as can be for miles on end, that are sandy, that are salt flats, that are rocks that have cracks in them, so when it does rain, it seeps below, or flat areas that, when it rains, hold enough water where life comes out of the ground. You've got amazing resources that says, what is that life? Is it nasty creatures that come out because other creatures come in? You have so much you can do with the variety of deserts, from the rocky red outcroppings to the flat dunes to giant sand dunes. They can hold secrets to your world, but they don't have to all look the same. There's no escape from the sun in Dungeons & Dragons when you're dealing with a desert. This actually can encourage your party to travel at night. And in the wide open spaces, dark vision doesn't mean shit, because dark vision is 30 to 60 feet. And in the vast span of the desert, when you can't travel during the day, you have to travel at night. And if you do travel in the day, then you risk exhaustion. This can actually make travel very interesting. Survival, navigation becomes difficult. What about all the sand and all the dunes looking the same, or the flat land never changing except for that one outcropping they've been keeping at the distance, at the right spire? What happens when it disappears? What about mirages in the distance? When the sun never disappears, the players have to think outside the box. The other thing about deserts in Dungeons & Dragons, you think of them as taking up vast expanses, meaning that there could be a desert that's miles and miles tall, but only a few miles wide. So therefore, we can risk it. We can get across it. But what lies in the sand? Is it a break that's miles wide, or is it miles long? Is it cavitated on mountains on both the top and the bottom? How is your desert, and how is it expansive yet limited? It can be the bordering area to an area, and that allows you to kind of hone the players into a certain place, but at the same time, it gives them a reason or a way to make it crossing. Imagine a desert that's basically filled with sandworms. Anything that crosses those risks being eaten by those sandworms. Dune much? It's coming out. Figured I'd give it an homage. So that's one of the interesting things. Valleys, ravines, and cliffs, when dealing with deserts, are your friends. The best part about these deserts, these cliffs, is there are no plants around. They are the limiting factor, and it's amazing what you can do with a little bit of deserts, a little bit of cliffs, and a couple of ravines tossed in there. You can accentuate these by also utilizing, well, basically sand along the other outskirtings. Then you can have forests or mountains that basically block those in. Sand is difficult terrain. In Dungeons & Dragons, having difficult terrain is important, especially when the monsters don't have difficult terrain, or if you have a ranger in the party who happens to be averse to traveling deserts. If you telegraph that you're going to have deserts, and sand is one of those things, that gives rangers a place to be. Spells become important. How do we travel across vast spans of sand? We need the right shoes. Do we have the right support? Do we need a caravan? Being difficult terrain just doesn't limit you when it comes to, well, doing, combat. It also has to do with when you are trying to move over land. Traveling difficult terrain leads to exhaustion, and then adding that you can't escape the sun, along with creatures, and now you have an interesting landscape that was more than just sand. Did you ever watch the movie Tremors? Dungeons & Dragons, burrowing creatures, never made much sense. Add some sand from a desert, now they make sense. Utilizing sand, deserts, and dunes allows you to have burrowing creatures that make sense. Also, sand is fun. Burrowing creatures are fun. And then when the creature burrows, it doesn't leave anything behind, because sand. Also, sand hides things. So let's talk about that too. Sand and blowing dunes could hide long-lost temples. We see it a lot in video games where those temples, those areas out there, those are covered by sand. What happens when a storm moves through and exposes that temple? Will it be exposed for a short period of time, a long period of time? That's something also to consider, is that sand and the deserts can hide things that have long been forgotten, bringing about lost treasures. We see it all the time in movies. Why not put it in D&D? Where there's water, there is a problem. Water is the problem. when you have a desert and you have a stream of water cutting through the desert, around those water, that's going to be where the monsters are. The prey is going to be there. So the prey is there, so are the predators. So when you have that water that runs through the area, that's where everything goes to live. That's where the plants are. That's where the monsters are. It's great to go there and refresh, but as adventurers, that's the last place in the world you're going to want to stay, because where you are is where predators are. So the players may want to go to water to get a refreshing drink, to basically replenish, to hunt, but it's the last place they want to stay. Or is the sand the scary spot? Is open sand the scary spot? Is the desert, is the rocks the scary spot? What and where are the safe places? You can plant these places. You can give players a place to go and to get to because of how deserts are laid out. They're very isolated in their ways. Deserts are a ton of fun in Dungeons & Dragons, from the mechanical advantages and disadvantages, to the heat bringing, exhaustion, to basically thematically allowing you to cover things that are ancient and lost, utilizing rivers to create places where the life actually goes. In the middle of the desert, there's an oasis that has magical life that the players are trying to get to. Deserts are an amazing thing because it creates vastness of nothingness, but at the same time can be teeming with magical life. It's a great place for earth elementals, for dragons, for creatures that are airborne, to be living in floating cities above the desert, which can never be seen because the sky is so bright that only at night, when they cover the stars, will you ever be able to see them. There's so many things you can do with deserts in Dungeons & Dragons. It's not just about the theme. It's not just about the mechanics. It's about bringing them all together. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. As always, like, subscribe, welcome to the background noise, because sometimes I have kids too. They've got to be around. So thank you as always, and we'll see you next time.